So Chief White, what I want to do first is just really focus on this this release that came out today. And I know in the release it's talking about Ronquillo, and you expressed, you know, you mourn the loss of any life, so I wanted to probably give you an opportunity to, you know, express that in terms of the loss of Ronquillo.
Yeah, the sanctity of life is extremely important to me. It's extremely important to the police department. Obviously, my heart, regardless of the circumstances, any loss of life, I certainly have sympathy for, and actually I have empathy for also. But when you talk about a mother or father losing a child, I can't imagine the pain that they're going through. And again, I have to say, and that's regardless of the circumstances. So I think that's very important. As a matter of fact, I would tell you that our department, and I'm part of an executive board of PERF, where we're actually looking at actions that we take as police officers in every serious scenario, specifically when officers are using a service weapon and someone has lost their life. We're taking a real strong, hard look at that, and we're asking ourselves, even though the officers might have been justified in doing that, we're asking ourselves, was there remotely anything that we can learn from that to try to mitigate those type of instances from happening in the future?
So the report talks about this is a final review of officer-involved shooting of Ronquillo. Can you talk a little bit about what this is?
Yeah, that is. First, let me say this: prior to anyone getting that report, we made it a point through Ronquillo's attorney to send a letter to the family delineating the outcome, and that and what the delineation was basically is that we did an administrative review, and that review has gone through several steps internally, and in addition to that, I had personally made a request to the Department of Justice through the FBI to take a look at this to see if there was the possibility of any civil rights violations, because I felt that we owed that to the community, we owed that to the family. I've gotten a reply back from them, which is attached to the information that we sent out to the media from the Department of Justice, and they stated that from their review it was insufficient evidence to suggest that there would be any violations of civil rights violations. So that report just pretty much delineates the steps that we've taken inside the department, the results that we came to, the entities that were involved, which includes the police department and obviously some degree includes the monitor. And the monitor looked at it and sent it back to us for further review, and that's on the timeline. And it left the internal investigation. It went to a tactical review board. It went to a shoot board. And by the way, there are some citizens in our community that's part of some of those boards. And as a result of that, with the monitor disagreeing with some of the tactics, as a result of that, everyone signed off on it and felt that the officer's actions was consistent with the policies of our police department.
And isn't that what the DA, Mitch Morrissey, basically said in his report in 2014 in August?
Yeah. Actually, the first thing that happens when an officer's involved in a shooting, and let me stay focused on the Ronquillo case. We investigate it and we send it to the DA to determine if there's any criminal allegations. The DA then in turn reviewed it. He reviewed it, and he stated that from a criminal perspective, there were no violations by law enforcement. And then after the criminal investigation, it comes back to the police department, where I direct my staff to do an administrative investigation to see if they violated any policies. Because sometimes you can be clear of criminal allegations, but administratively you might have done some things that conflict with our policies and procedures. So that report iterates the steps that we went through from an administrative perspective. And again, barring the disagreement that the monitor had as it relates to the tactics, he agreed with the shooting was justified, but he disagreed that perhaps the tactics could have been different. So that aside, the final determination that was made by me and made by the Executive Director of Safety is that the officers act within policy.
And so now, having the opportunity to look back, what are your thoughts about the tactics? Because you also mentioned that there's been some some changes that you've been looking at
Yeah.
in terms of use of force, shooting with
Yeah,
vehicles, body cameras,
Yeah,
etc.
yeah, and we've made several changes, but those changes weren't made as a result of one incident. We've had prior to me even being here, I think we had over the course of 7 years, we had about 8 or 9 officers shooting into vehicles where individuals are either seriously injured or lost their lives. And I just felt that, you know what, maybe it is time that we look at what we're doing, and is there a better way that we can do this? So after looking at some of the, and I got to tell you, our policy prior to changing the policy was pretty consistent with most major cities as it relates to shooting to motor vehicles. But that just wasn't enough. After looking at that policy, going to PERF is a police executive research forum that does research as it relates to policing and makes suggestions as it relates to guidelines. After looking at some of the other policies that were just a little bit more restrictive than our policy and the policies of many departments, I made a decision that we need to change our policy. So a vehicle can no longer be used as a deadly weapon as it relates to justification for officers to shoot into it. Prior to the policy change, a vehicle could be used as a deadly weapon, and that could, given the circumstances, that could justify officers shooting into that vehicle if they felt their life or someone else's life was in danger. As a result of the policy change, we're stating that a vehicle should no longer be the only justification for shooting into a car if you feel that your life is in danger. So what we're suggesting that we do is officers need to tactically put themselves out of harm's way, and we provide additional training with that. And we also stated that you should no longer consider a vehicle as the only reason that you can shoot into a car if you feel that you're in danger.
So just basically for those that are not familiar with the Ronquillo case, what were just some of the basic facts surrounding that case?
Okay. Our fugitive task force, we have a task force that consists of members of our department and other members of the agency, had gotten notification. Ronquillo had a warrant on him, and he was also operating a stolen car. So in an effort to arrest him, the fugitive task force were looking for him. They found him, and prior to them being able to come up with the strategies to say how can we do this safely, he drove off in the car. So now we're following Ronquillo in the car, looking for a good location where they can make a stop and make the arrest in the most effective way. So apparently at some point Ronquillo parked his car, unbeknownst to the officers at the particular time, at a funeral home. Actually, I don't know if it was a funeral home, but it was a place where there was a wake that was going on. So apparently it was a funeral home. He parked it along the side, so the officers did not know it was a funeral home. They felt that was a good, safe place to make that stop and make that apprehension. So they pinned. So as he parked the car in reverse, parked the car back in first, the officers pinned him in with 2 police cars. He put his car in reverse and jumped over the curb, and actually, as a result of, at a very high speed, a police officer was injured as a result of that. And then he put the car in forward and came towards 4 additional officers who were at that point were on foot out of their police car. Those officers obviously felt that their lives were in danger of this car coming towards them, fired several shots, and as a result of that, he lost his life.
And then, of course, there's been some community outrage and protests and concern. You've done a lot of engagement with the community. You've heard a lot. What are some of the things that you would like to be known about these circumstances that maybe the community's not hearing, or questions that are not being asked?
Yeah, what I think is important is that I want the community to know that I and the police department in general really value the sanctity of life. I mean, it is ultimately our responsibility. In law enforcement in general, police chiefs, commanders, sergeants, we want the troops to come here to do their job, and we want them to be able to go home to their families at night. That doesn't change. That will never change. But what I want this community to also know is that when these officers are confronted in these serious situations with individuals that have the potential of creating harm to them or to a resident, I want that person that is that threat to be able to go home or to go to jail or to go wherever they want to go also without losing their life. So That being said, I want the community to know that I value the life of everyone, not just the police officers, but the individuals that are putting themselves or putting the police officers in harm's way. And that is one of the things that we're really constantly looking at. And when we see scenarios like the Ronquillo, the Hernandez, or any serious scenario where someone loses their life at the hands of a police officer, whether it's justified or not, we still, and I have a responsibility to this community's chief, and I have a responsibility to the men and women of the police department, for us to look at that scenario and say, it might have been legal, but was there something that we can do, or is there something we can do in the future to try to mitigate this from occurring, where an officer can definitely go home, but at the same time, the individuals that's creating that threat, can we de-escalate it to the point where that person doesn't have to lose their life? Now, there are times, and everyone can make judgment whether these are one of those times. There are times, no matter what you do, no matter how you assess it, no matter what you learn from past incidents, that there are going to be these incidents where individuals are going to create such a threat where deadly force will be totally justified. And not only totally justified, but also necessary. So one of the things that we're doing as a police department, we do a tremendous job in training officers on the legality of what they can do. Then they know the laws, they know the policies, and they know the procedures. But what we're also doing a better job at is training them. Not only do we want your actions to be legal, but we want your actions to be absolutely necessary. And again, that is not speaking to the Ronquillo case or any other case. That's just speaking philosophically. That's where we want to raise the bar as relates to how we conduct ourselves as police officers in this community, and many chiefs across the country are attempting to do the same thing.
In this report, you talk about the use of, or the implementation of, body cameras, handcuffing wounded suspects, and then of course we talked about the discharging of firearms at motor vehicles. You want to talk about the body cameras? Yeah,
part of what I think we have to do is be extremely transparent, and prior to the implementation of body cams, what happens in a lot of scenarios, and again, that has nothing to do with the Ronquillo, officers will be involved in an incident, and there'll be no forensic evidence or no witnesses. So it comes down to the officer's statement that what occurred, and the individual that the officer is dealing with is probably being arrested. And it falls into a category of not sustained. That means that we can't prove that the officer is right or wrong, or we can't prove what the person is making allegations against the officer is right or wrong. With the advent of body cams, which we are now implementing, it will kind of really do away with a lot of those not sustained allegations, because the body cam, the body cam and the policy that we have will really show from the beginning to the end exactly what happened. And it really speaks to, I think, the importance of being transparent. So the body cam is not only is it evidence, but because it is evidence, everything that occurs, that body cam is part of the court document. If in fact that scenario gets to the court, but it also speaks to our commitment to be transparent. Because what we've seen, and we did a pilot project last year with the body cams, and what we've seen as a result of that, there are fewer allegations made on police officers, because at the same time, there are occasionally citizens that will make allegations that are not substantiated by any facts. But if they know it's on camera, they're going to be hesitant to make that allocation. But the flip side of that is there are fewer uses of force by police officers also, because now officers know that everything they do is going to be recorded. It'll be recorded, and it's also visual. So the body cams, I think, plays a significant part in our effort to be totally transparent.
And talk a little bit about updating your policy as it relates to handcuffing wounded suspects.
Yeah, historically, and what I'm speaking to is just not our department, but just historically, what happens if an officer is involved in an incident where officer uses his or her service weapon, and that person that they used the service weapon on had a service weapon or had something that was deadly, and the officer's not sure if the person is wounded to the point where they're disabled and they won't be able to use that deadly weapon. So what they do is they would approach that individual, particularly if somebody is on their stomach and their arms are on their stomach and they can't see their hands, the officer will approach that individual, will handcuff that individual for the officer's safety and the individual safety. And a lot of times they do not unhandcuff that individual until they get into the ambulance. So now what we're encouraging is, if you must handcuff for your safety and the safety of that individual, fine. But once it is determined that that person is no longer a threat, you need to unhandcuff the person, and you need to, and if it's appropriate, you need to administer the proper first aid also.
And just unrelated, I heard that you had traveled and had done a presentation before chiefs or law enforcement and seeking some of your guidance, etc.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, obviously, I've been fortunate enough to, I get to kind of travel around the country and talk to police departments and future chiefs and current chiefs about transformational change. You know, how do you change the police department? How do you get closer to the community? And obviously, we have our challenges here as it relates to that. And normally, I get hired to kind of to get departments closer to connecting with the community, because the bottom line is, if we're going to, you know, number one, our primary responsibility is preventing crime from occurring, and the greatest resource we have as police officers are the residents out in the community. And the reality of it is, residents are more willing to work with us if they know us, if they trust us, if we treat them with dignity and respect, and if they have a voice in the issues that are relevant to them as it relates to their safety. So that's what we're trying to do in our police department. And you know, and also, in order for that to happen in our department here, we've got to change. We need to change our culture. We need to change what we value, and we've done a lot of that, and we're going to continue to do that. So I get the opportunity to speak to that based on my past experiences at other police departments and some of the things that we're attempting to do here. Now, recently, PERF, this organization I told you about, went to Scotland, and actually I couldn't go, so I sent one of my deputy chiefs to Scotland. Scotland, which does not have the number of guns we have in our country, but they really do a superior job on de-escalating serious injuries of suspects and of police officers, particularly when the person is armed with a knife, not necessarily with a gun. In other words, they don't believe that you have to take a gun to a knife fight, and they do a phenomenal job on de-escalation. So recently, I went to Washington, D.C., with 200 other police chiefs across the country, and we talked about the Scotland experience, and what we're attempting. And the individuals from Scotland actually came as part of that conference. And what we're trying to understand is, or there's some things, it's consistent with what I said earlier to you, or there's some things that we can do better in American policing as it relates to de-escalation, and really valuing and truly valuing the sanctity of life, not the sanctity of life of just a police officer, but those individuals that we're dealing with also. And I think there's some lessons that could be learned from the Scotland experience. They're not going to do it exactly the way we do it, because Scotland is not a country that has 300 million guns. We have 300 million guns, and obviously our country values the Second Amendment. Scotland has a lot fewer guns, but I am still of the opinion that they do a better job when they are confronted in those dangerous situations, particularly knives, and we get confronted with knives all the time, and de-escalating them better than what we do over here in America. So we're trying to learn from some of those lessons and implement them, not just in our department, but in many departments across the country.
Just project 50 years out and visualize the legacy of Chief White on law enforcement in the city of Denver. What would that legacy be?
Well, there's a couple things that I would like for my legacy to be. Number one, I like to think that I've reached out to some young people who I thought had a lot of potential, and helped develop them to be police chiefs. And I am proud to say, to date, there are about 10 individuals that I was able to mentor that I think that are outstanding police chiefs across the country. So that is important, because I think all of us have a responsibility to help somebody along the way. And for me, since this is my profession, my responsibility is to help people who I think understand philosophically what policing is about, understand that our customer is really the citizen, not the men and women that we're counting on doing the job. We need them, we need their morale certainly, but ultimately our customer and the men and women of this department customer are the 600,000 citizens that work in this community. And we need to do some things to make sure that we value them, and to make sure that they're really the key to our success in really preventing crime. So I like to think that I contribute a little bit in getting us closer to having that relationship that is absolutely imperative if in fact we're really going to focus on what we get paid to do, preventing crime. And that can only occur, and I will tell you after 40 years, that can only occur if we have this relationship with the community. And that community, and that relationship with most of the communities is only going to occur if they know that we respect them, and that we treat them with dignity and respect regardless of their station in life, and they have a voice in the things that are important to them as it relates to their safety.
How can we get more black people from our community interested in law enforcement and joining the police force?
You know what? That is a tremendous challenge. I need to count on brothers like you to say that, you know what, if you want to make a change, one of the effective ways that you can make a change is being part of the process. You know, we do aggressive recruiting. We do target recruiting, meaning we go to, if we think that we have a void in Latinos or in African Americans or in females, we try to target those locations where those individuals are, and really kind of almost we do a lot of mentoring to individuals who are not on the police department, but who we think has an interest in it and who we think would be a good fit for this community. I just think that we have to really, I think it's my responsibility and the responsibility of a lot of other police administrators to really talk about the importance of diversity. And it is critically important that we have people that represent our community. But there's two things about diversity. A lot of times we talk about diversity, and you and I have talked about diversity, and I talk with a lot of citizens, and they say, hey, we need to have more black officers, we need to have more females, we need to have more Latino officers. I get it, I agree to that, but I got to tell you what else we need to have. Regardless of the race of the individual, we need to have people that have diversity of thought. I mean, because you can be black and still not have an appreciation for the challenges that are occurring in a community that you're responsible for policing. Or you can be white and not have an appreciation for the community that you're policing that is white in your community, or Latino. So not only do we need to make sure that we're representing our communities by the color of our skin, but we need to make sure that we're representing our communities by diversity of the thought of our mind.
Wow. Chief White, I want to give you the final word, but could you again just summarize what this report is, why was it important, and then anything else that you'd like to say?
I think the report is pretty much a reiteration of the events that occurred in July of 2014 that unfortunately resulted in the loss of life of Ronquillo. And it is an attempt to be transparent, not only with the family, but with the community. It is also a commitment, because I think the report concludes by saying lessons learned. Lessons learned as a result of that incident and the many incidents that occurred prior to that. And it speaks to our willingness to make changes in an effort to do everything that we can to mitigate these things from occurring in the future.
Thank you, Chief White.
You're welcome.